Good morning from Easier Habits Live, your favorite 8 a.m. business live stream. I'm Alec from Easier Habits, and this is Meg.
Hello.
And we will be starting in on our 4-month sprint. So we talked a little bit about planning it and what activities we'll be doing, but we'll be checking in with how exactly that is getting to a start, what questions we have, what questions we need to answer, that kind of thing.
Fun stuff. But first, that communication tip. So yesterday I talked about kind of talking to your future self, or kind of envisioning your future self in some of that self-talk. And I know Alec had talked about some of the self-talk in general, but I thought I would kind of give my take on some of the things that have worked for me as well with the self-talk. So I really like the family systems, framework or theory or whatever, for it's called internal family systems framework for just understanding personality, because it basically looks at our brains and ourselves very much kind of like in Inside Out, the Disney movie, where we've got all of those different kind of pieces inside of us that, like, not in a way that's, multiple personalities or anything like that, but in a way where we have different aspects of ourselves that come out in different contexts. And recognizing that, and then sometimes allowing those pieces of yourself to acknowledge one another. And I know that sounds like kind of crazy, and I'm trying to make it sound not crazy, but talking to yourself in a way where you recognize, okay, this part of me wants to go take a nap. And then there's another part of me that's judging that part of me, saying you're so lazy. And then there's another part of me, that I can kind of think about that as like a round table in my head, where they're all just kind of discussing and coming up with certain conclusions, that by doing that you can accept those parts of you that you kind of try to hide a little bit, that shadow self, I guess, and by accepting that those parts of you exist, you can also move forward kind of with your self-talk in a way where everybody gets heard, where you are acknowledging everything together and then also making a conscious decision to move forward in a certain way. In a way that feels authentic to you as a whole, because we all have contradictory pieces of ourselves. And it can be hard to reconcile those, I think, sometimes when we're struggling with something.
They can have a seat at the table, but they don't have to lead the discussion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, the E-Myth Revisited, which is the entrepreneur myth, it's an interesting book that kind of uses that framework, but specifically for entrepreneurs. And so it says, like, entrepreneurs have to wear several hats. So you have your innovator hat, you have your systems hat, you have your craftsperson hat, and they're kind of at odds with each other.
Yeah, right. And and you can do this however it works for you. I sometimes like to actually visualize this, as like there's a round table, and everybody's seated around it, except not everyone's seated at the table. Some people are wandering off, and one person's sitting on the table or whatever. But like, you have that image, in mind. Some people prefer to talk out loud, and if you do that, find a place where you can be alone. Generally is good, but again, whatever works for you, whether it's visual or auditory, or if you kind of like to move your hands while you're thinking things out loud, looking in the mirror or whatever, and doing your best not to shut up any one of those pieces, but to facilitate a conversation with yourself where everyone has their say and there's no judgment. It's just kind of what's going on in your mind.
Yeah. I mean, so, for instance, if you're feeling discouraged, allowing yourself to admit that and, like, acknowledge the feeling can help you address that, but address it in a way that you want to, with choice, rather than, ignoring it, and then just caving because you're exhausted.
Yeah, I've never done that.
So, all right. Anyway, so we laid out yesterday just our basic 4-month plan that we I guess 4.5 month plan, but we're prepping for that. We want to be running, we want to be running 2 5-day challenges a month, and then kind of shooting at a minimum for 1 person from each on average, but like ideally 2 would get us to where we want to go a lot quicker. And we identify the basic activities. There's going to be some ads, and there's going to be some direct outreach. And while we're doing that, we're kind of creating a content library, so that of stuff that we could reuse for ads, for just content marketing, for emails later on, etc.
Yep.
So that's the grand plan. How did it go yesterday?
It was good. There were definitely moments of overwhelm, of like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. And it was interesting because yesterday I had, kind of pre-planned, if I run into, an obstacle or something, I was going to come and talk to you. And that wasn't really my issue so much. It wasn't that I didn't know what to do next. It was that there was so much to do next that my brain was just kind of like, oh my gosh. And, I'm trying to like, deal with jet lag while also, trying to move forward with things and not give myself over to, just my body being tired, because my body's always tired. And kind of finding where the balance is there was hard yesterday. So I worked a lot on just outreach and responding to people that I met over in Japan while I was there, as well as kind of fleshing out what I was going to do for the different days. So what is the content I'm going to show? How am I going to show it? And then what kinds of things am I going to elicit from the participants? And so that was good. There were definitely moments of like just staring at the ceiling where like quite literally just like, I don't know what I'm doing. But in a kind of difference from, previous ways that I would deal with this is frequently I would just try to shut my brain down and go do something else completely, where I just kind of let myself do nothing for a while. And I did also, take a couple of naps because I needed naps. And so by doing that, I was able to kind of deal with the dopamine load, where I just want to kind of like throw dopamine at my brain because it feels good. I still feel like I didn't do enough, and I think that partially is just one of the ways that my brain works, is that I always feel like it's never going to be enough. But with some of that outreach, I ended up, I was talking to this wonderful person, Natsuki, who I have known for quite a long time, actually. And we met several times while I was in Japan this last time. And we were talking about, working together and potential collaborations moving forward. And we ended up doing a YouTube Live this morning, which was really nice, because as helpful as these are, they're a little bit too hard for, my target demographic. They're great because they get me, like accountable and putting my stuff out there so that, people are watching or whatever. But with Natsuki, it's more like we're actually targeting these language learners, these people who are needing the communication. It was pretty much all in Japanese, which was, fun at 5 a.m. But hopefully, again, it was kind of one of those places where I had to make a choice, right? Like, am I willing to, lose a little bit of sleep to do something that will potentially be able to move my business forward? And again, a lot of that came out of my, reaching out and things like that yesterday. So that was good.
So how did that move your business forward?
Well, and that's one of the things is like, okay, so yes, it just happened a couple of hours ago, but one, it's got me speaking Japanese online in a place where people can see it. Natsuki is great at like actually asking people to like and subscribe and telling people about the coaching and everything that she does and that I do as well. We talked about that just a little bit. But I think more of it is when people can know who I am and what it is that I do, because as much as I feel like I talk about it constantly, there's still people who don't know. And so it got that out there, and hopefully it's something that I can then share and people can see that even though I don't speak Japanese perfectly, I'm able to communicate, right? And that's what I help people do in English, is using whatever it is English that they have now, right, to communicate what they're trying to get across. So hopefully, I guess I need to do some sharing of that. I did share it beforehand, just to see, you know, if anybody would watch it live. But now that I've done it, then I'll share that as well.
That's good to get some exposure. So specifically, how are people going to find you from that video?
I'll have to ask Natsuki if she's put, because her stuff is on there and she can connect to me, obviously. But maybe if we can put my stuff specifically on there, that would be good too.
Yeah.
So.
And that's like, as you were reflecting on like what you did yesterday, I could tell that there was a lot of like overwhelm just from like the volume of things that came spilling out.
There was so much.
And specifically the way that you think about that opportunity is like, am I doing do I want to sleep in or do I want to do something? And that's actually the wrong dichotomy.
Probably.
Because like if you're doing something but it's not helping you get people to your 5-day challenge, then maybe it is actually just worth sleeping in, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
And so I'm not saying that, you know, because this might have been a good opportunity, so I don't want to pick on this opportunity, but just in terms of like how you're thinking about opportunities and evaluating, right? And so, you know, it's a lot of times we want to grab a lot of opportunities, and that's one of the ways that we can get overwhelmed rather than viewing everything through the lens of how can I get more people into the 5-day challenge. And very specifically, right, we have this like, you know, 4-month plan, but really all of this hinges, like the only thing we have to do for the next couple of weeks is fill the first 5-day challenge.
Yeah. And I think that right there for me, it's a good reminder, one, here to have that, because I think even now, like my brain, my default is thinking about getting clients as opposed to thinking about the 5-day challenge, right? Because for me, the 5-day challenge is about getting it. It's like a thing to get clients, but in and of itself, it doesn't necessarily do anything. But then also recognizing that with that framework, it then becomes like that same level of importance as everything else that might possibly lead to a client.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that right now, that is my focus, and not even because it is the one thing that will always work every time, but because I need to focus on something.
Right. So, I mean, basically, a lot of times it's not quite this way, but it's almost like, you know, pushing on a boulder. And, you know, you're like, all right, this boulder is getting clients, and I'm pushing really hard on this boulder and trying to move it, right? And so really the 5-day challenge is our lever. Yeah. And so if you're pursuing all of the opportunities, it's like pushing on that boulder. And this lever may not be big enough. It may not be strong enough. It might not be positioned in the right place. It might not work out, but we know we need a lever. Yeah. And so we want to put all of our effort on trying to see if we can get this lever to work. And if we can't, then we find a different one. Yeah. But I think, when your client finding energies are dispersed among a lot of different avenues, that makes sense. Rather than focused on one place where you can get, you know, the maximum return for your effort, then it's much harder. And that's why it's like, all right, we're focused on this particular avenue. I mean, we talked about focusing on work. The mantra of Alex Hormozy is the one audience, one channel, one message. Yeah. And so that's, you know, that's basically what we're doing is, you know, our audience is, well, we're still we're still refining that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's Japanese business people who want to break into an English market, but I think there's several sub-markets in terms of entrepreneur, business development, small business owner, etc. Those all be different avatars. But one audience, you know, our channel is Facebook primarily, because that's where we're running ads, that's where we're going to be doing the group, etc. And then the message is, you know, you, with a little coaching, you can market in English in a week, basically.
Yep.
And so, you know, that, we could tweak that, but like, you know, like that is all of what we're trying to do.
Yes.
And so with your long list of things to do, like, are they prioritized by the 5-day challenge, getting people in the 5-day challenge?
They know. So that sounds like my priority today. First is that prioritization.
Yeah.
And within that, I think the first thing would be, because I'm going to be doing it in a group that already exists, that has like 150 people in it, is post something in that group that it's coming up.
Yeah, great.
So that's my first thing. Yeah. Which is interesting just because I think so much in terms of, you know, details sometimes that I don't see the whole and how they all fit together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I'm just like looking at everything and it's just too much. I can't see how the details all fit into it. So, yeah. So I think that's going to be good. And I think, honestly, probably better for me not to line everything out, because then I'll have it all in my head as opposed to post in that group. And then I can figure out what's next. I mean, I'm not sure.
So, I mean, the way I handle this, right? So when I have a lot of things to do, I have my whiteboard right there, and it has priorities, and then I have my top 3. I have a line under them. Like, these are the things I need to accomplish today.
Got it.
And then, you know, I have other priorities that are there, and, you know, if it's been on the bottom of the list, but it becomes more urgent, it will jump up to the top. Yeah. But that helps me focus, because, you know, when I sit down, I know exactly what I need to do. It's actually like 3 things is fairly achievable for the day. And because I have that like hard line that I've drawn there, you know, it makes me feel good when I finish those and reach for just a little bit of something else.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense.
But also, and so I do highly recommend prioritizing.
Okay.
And then setting of like a fairly conservative, like what you need to accomplish, and then everything else is a plus.
Okay. Now, and this is something that I still struggle with when thinking about what I have to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
How do I figure out where to draw that line?
One of those is 3 things, right? Just arbitrarily after the 3-item mark. And the question is, like, what is the size and significance of those 3 things? Which you kind of have to play with. One of mine was literally, like, pay somebody because we'd been out of town and out of touch with our marketer. And so I'm like, oh, okay.
Gotta do that.
You know, make sure I do that. And I put that at the top of the list just so like I didn't forget, because there were a lot of other things. But, you know, the third one was much bigger, which was, you know, applying for contracts, and so reaching out to people about contracts. So that was, you know, that's much bigger, and so they're not all the same.
Yeah.
And often, actually, I find it's kind of like that. I'll do 2 like very specific or targeted things. The other thing is, because I've been sick recently, actually, the second thing was health practice.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I need to get better to make this, and I know that I need to put that on the board, or else I won't do the more intense things. Like, you know, I won't do the really intense yoga that's, you know, just intense, like it's just at the point where it's not too intense where it'll make me feel worse, but it's intense enough that it's really going to work out all of the gunk in my system. So I put that up there. And that, some of those, like the full array of health things that I can do does take at least an hour.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So yeah, it's like hot and cold showers, yoga, neti pot, gargling salt water, breathing exercises,
so much.
Some meditation. Yeah, this is a lot. So if I don't,
but it helps you breathe. So
it helps me breathe. It helps me have the energy to focus the rest of the time. A lot of what I was doing yesterday, since the kids were home, was like running interference so that you could have some time.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. That was huge, just having the time to kind of wrap my brain around everything.
Yeah.
I think just on an emotional level, almost. Yeah.
So
it's well, and for me, switching gears is tricky. And so I've been in, Japan mode and everything, working on, this musical, this play, and doing a lot of, kind of back and forth, and some networking and everything like that. But then, okay, now switching gears, now I'm back here, and this is, my routine here and how I get things done, and trying to get that momentum in a new context it's a thing that people deal with, so...
Well, and yeah, I would spell this out. If you wanted, even the first item on your list could be making the list.
Make the list!
As soon as you have it, you crossed it off.
Make the list. Prioritize the list.
That might be checking it. Make a prioritized list would be a good item number one.
Okay.
And item number 2 could be message the group. And then, those are fairly short. So I would do like a big chunkier thing that you'd spend more of your day doing, which is like outreach, set a goal of specific number of people to specifically reach out to.
Okay.
Right? And that could be a good start, but as part of the making the list, you'll also have 4, 5, and 6, which is like, next step for your content plan. I'm doing some of the advertising and marketing.
Yeah.
But maybe one of the things that could be on your list at some point, but not top priority, doesn't have to be today, right? We could do and could benefit from me is like as well, like going through some kind of Facebook advertising course, just so we're more familiar with those crazy tools, which are so much more complex than they really need to be for most people.
Right.
So,
oh my gosh, that was exhausting yesterday.
So I had Meg sit with me while I created the lead ad, but it like we'd never done one before. And so, creating a campaign and an ad set and an ad within the ad set and campaign, and then choosing the audience, and then creating the form, creating the ad copy, and all sorts of other things like creating the... In order to capture people's information, you have to have a privacy policy that you link to. So we created a privacy policy on our website after some joking about the privacy policies we'd like to put on the website.
Yes! Oh, goodness.
I grabbed some generic website and then altered it because the generic stuff was like, we will use all your data for all the things.
Which is
like,
stupid.
Nope, we're not going to share it with anybody else, for marketing purposes. We will use it for our own services, including contacting you and providing services and letting you know of the services that we have.
Because I think people who use your data for whatever reason are douche canoes.
Anyway, so that was going to be part of the original privacy policy.
Yes, that's my own personal privacy policy.
So, anyway, so, and that is a small example of like having a little bit of fun with a painful process.
Yes.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah. And that is one of the things, like, as you're doing these 3 things, like you're prioritizing the list, a lot of the times you want to think like, oh, I'll just throw up an ad and it will be really simple and short. And that's part of the reason why like keeping it to 3 things is good, because chances are like one of those things, if it was like put an ad up and like, oh, this will just take me 20 minutes, I think it took me an hour and a half
at least. I was with you for about 50 minutes of that,
so and then kids were interrupting me, and so like getting the last bit done It's crazy.
Oh,
too. So
but they're
anyway.
in school today.
Yay, quiet. But all the point is like, yeah, like I think getting that list of, brainstorm all the things you can do, put the top 3 for today, which can include the prioritized brainstormed list, right? Can include, group stuff and outreach. That's a good start. And then what you have for tomorrow with this prioritized list, that becomes easier, right?
Yeah.
Since you've invested in that, because you're like, all right, well, I've done the list and I've done the Facebook thing. I still need to do outreach. I'll leave that up and I'll grab 2 other items, shift them to the top 3 for today.
Yeah. I'm going to use my new magnet board for that.
Okay, magnet board. Yeah, you created a beautiful magnet board.
It's
so that's
so pretty.
That's another great thing to do, like create artifacts and environments that inspire you to work.
Mm-hmm. And I can just move magnets instead of having to erase and rewrite something. Such a pain.
So yeah, that is a great way to go. And I think the other psychological thing of like having 3 relatively scoped priorities, like that you actually can accomplish that day, is like I didn't do a lot more than 3, but I did at least sit down and be like, all right, I'm going to start, like I'm going to have a browser open with like the first item of another one.
Yeah.
And I felt virtuous doing more, right?
Yeah.
Rather than constantly not enough.
And I think that's where I need to switch it, because even when I do these are my 3 I have to get dones, there's still always more have to get dones in my brain, even if they're not have to get dones on the list. But I think there's something about physically putting that line there, right? That really makes that, say, okay, it's like when my kids were little, were they fed and relatively, alive, and I was still alive. Like those were my 3 things, right? They needed, I guess, fed, well, not even necessarily clothed in the summer. Sometimes it was just diapers, but like, I guess, physical maintenance, fed and changed, I guess. And then a little bit of emotional, like they're not screaming and crying because they're sad or whatever. And I'm not screaming and crying because I'm sad or whatever. And that was enough. And I find myself, now that things aren't quite so like urgent as they are when you have newborns, then, I think, okay, well, I should be able to do more, but that's not always true.
Well, and if you don't define it, then you're obviously not doing all the things, and you're really training your brain to constantly tell you that you're not doing enough, which is being a terrible boss to yourself.
Don't be a bad boss to yourself.
So, like the idea of like, all right, have 3 very achievable things that you celebrate by, getting done. Give yourself a pat on the back for once you do those things, doing extra, etc., is a much healthier brain space to be in.
I like that brain space. I'm going to work on that brain space.
All right. So, we're winding up. Let me give the business tip. So I've been talking about focusing within work, and obviously this list is a great example. But I talked yesterday about setting a deadline, and part and parcel of setting a deadline is having something to focus on. And people go really 2 routes with that. It can be very tangible, like we're going to run 8 5-day challenge sessions, right? That's a very tangible, that's like more of like an achievable SMART goal, right? And then you have the stretch goal, which is we'd like to acquire, at least 10 people, maybe 20, stretch goal 20 people from these 5-day challenges as clients. And so the combination of those 2, I find personally is helpful. Have the both. So you have the process goal, the thing that's in your control and achievable. I will do X amount of things that seem reasonable. And then the stretch goal to motivate yourself so that, maybe at the end of the day when you've hit the doing the thing, I've done that enough, but you're like, I still have this stretch goal. Let me pull in one more thing. Not because I have to, but because I want to achieve that goal, and I'm that kind of person, right? That, the tension between those 2. And then, so the stretch goal makes it so that you don't kind of rest easy, because a lot of times our process goals, let's be honest, are too easy. Right? And at the same time, if you only have a stretch goal to focus on, you get lost. What do I do? And I think that's kind of where you felt like you were yesterday, which is we have this big goal of running these 5-day challenges, and what do I do? And so all right, now process goal.
Yeah.
Like mechanically, let's focus on that a little bit more. Have the prioritized list of the process. And when that feels more comfortable, right? When that feels like not crazy and exploding and all over the place, then we can revisit and kind of review like, all right, we've got the process. We're working the process. Is it getting to where we want to go?
Yeah.
And then we can, add in more or do more. But let's nail the initial process first and get comfortable with that before we start being but I need to do XYZ as well.
Yep. Okay.
So
awesome.
Right. So have something to focus on, and I actually say 2 things to focus on that are really 2 different sides of the same coin. An achievable, smart process goal of what you're going to do, and usually a stretch goal of an amazing outcome you would like to accomplish. And that will, with the deadline, will help anchor you to be able to decide which of all of these things that need to be done that you're going to focus on.
Awesome.
Thank you. Until tomorrow, make big changes one small habit at a time.